Since UFC 247 last Saturday night, there's been a lot of talk about MMA judging, ranging from there being no criteria in MMA to it being a boxing model to it being completely subjective. But that's not, in fact, the case. MMA has a criteria, it's written, it's on the ABC website. So I'm going to read that here. I think most people who watch MMA have never put any effort or time into looking at the judging criteria, or maybe don't even know it exists, but it does. So we're going to look at it here, and we'll get a base knowledge of the criteria from MMA right now. So if you want changes to that, if you disagree with it, at least you have the knowledge of what's there right now. We look at the UFC broadcast at the weekend and Dominic Cruz and Joe Rogan talking about MMA and have a lot of misnomers when it comes to judging. These guys and fighters as well, they know an awful lot about the fighting, the technical and tactical aspects, but judging, they don't seem to have a full knowledge of it. And the knowledge is out there. So let's start by just reading the MMA judging criteria as we go. And I'll go on and I'll explain a little bit of it as it goes. But I want to read it as it's written. So this is the MMA judging criteria scoring approved on August 2nd, 2016. So obviously the MMA judging criteria was changed around then. And this is the mission statement from the ABC MMA Rules Committee. It's to evolve mixed martial arts judging criteria to focus on the result of action versus action itself. It must be stated that our criteria is to be used in specific order. These criteria may not move from one to the next without the prior criteria being 100% even in the judge's assessments. Effective striking and grappling shall be considered the first priority of round assessments. Effective aggressiveness is a plan B and should not be considered unless the judge does not see any advantage in the effective striking/grappling realm. Cage ring control, plan C, should only be needed when all other criteria are 100% even for both competitors. This will be extremely rare occurrence. So John Anik reads this on every UFC broadcast. He says, there's three ways of scoring fights. So the effective striking grappling, number one, aggressiveness, two, plan B, and plan C is the ring control. So if someone hasn't landed way more strikes or dominated in grappling, you go to the plan B, the aggressiveness, and in plan C is the cage control. So that's a lot of things. A lot of people say, and John Jones said it himself at the weekend, he had the octagon control. That doesn't count unless everything else is even. So that's the first misnomer, I think, and that's in the rules. That's written here in the rules, and the judges know that. The judges judge by these rules. So let's talk about the prioritized criteria even. I'm not the best reader in the world, as you might have noticed, but let's get into it anyway. Effective striking grappling. Legal blows that have immediate or cumulative impact with the potential to contribute towards the end of the match, with the immediate weighing in more heavily than the cumulative impact. So that's important, I think. The word immediate there. So what does that mean? So let's say someone lands 6 body shots around, and by the 5th round those body shots add up and they win the fight because of it. That wouldn't be an immediate impact. That would be a cumulative impact, where an immediate impact would be someone getting a big knockdown, someone landing a big strike and knocking someone down. So in that round, that impactful strike would be scored more than the body shots which will accumulate and work for you down the road. So they score, but not as much as the immediately impactful shot. I think people need to realise that. The Derek Lewis fight at the weekend, the 3rd round of that fight, was a perfect example. Ilir Latifi took him down and landed some shots. They accumulated those shots. Derek Lewis got back up and landed the more immediately impactful shots in that round and won the round based on this written criteria that we're looking at right here now. This criteria exists. I'm reading it in front of you. So that's one thing we really need to know. And I think that's, to me, having spoken to Ben Cartledge, the MMA judge, over on the podcast, this is one thing you have to learn. This is the most important thing, I think, in MMA judging. So let's go on to the next part. Successful execution of takedowns, submission attempts, reversals, and achievement of advantageous positions that produce immediate or cumulative impact with the potential to contribute to the end of the match, with the immediate weighing more heavily than the cumulative impact. It shall be noted that a successful takedown is not merely a changing of position, but the establishment of an attack from the use of that takedown. So that's very interesting there, that line. So a takedown is not just the changing of position, but establishment of an attack from the use of the takedown. So when you get a takedown, you're not getting a big score for that, unless it's a slam takedown and there's an impact on it. You're not getting a big score from that takedown. What you're getting is a more advantageous position to land your strikes. So if you're losing on the feet, you're not winning there. You take it to the ground and you land your strikes from on top. You're winning that fight in that position. If you just get the takedown, it gets back up and you're losing on the feet again, you don't get anything for that, because it's an offensive sport. MMA is an offensive sport. All these criteria that we're reading here are about it being an offensive sport. You won't see a defensive thing here anywhere. So what does it mean, an offensive sport? Every rule I've read out so far, and the rest of them are the same. It's about landing strikes. It's about going towards the finish of the fight. So just taking someone down is not going towards the end of the fight unless you land strikes or get a submission from that takedown. So that move itself is not getting towards the end of the fight. What comes after might get it, so therefore you can score there. So I think that's what they mean by that when they say that in the criteria. Top and bottom position fighters are assessed more on the impactful, effective result of their actions more so than their position. Exactly what I was explaining there. So if you get taken down and you're on the bottom and you land the more impactful strikes via the rules here, you will win that round. And if you're on top and you land the more impactful strikes, you will win that round as well. It doesn't matter what position you're in, it matters what you land from that position. This criterion will be the deciding factor in the high majority of decisions when scoring a round. The next two criteria must be treated as a backup and used only when effective striking and grappling is 100% equal for the round. So look, we've talked about the effective striking and grappling there. Let's talk about effective aggressiveness now. And I think actually before we move on to that, effective grappling as well has a lot to do with going for submissions. I said it's an offensive sport, and if you listen to the podcast I did with Ben Cartledge, we talked about that as well. If you're going for submissions and almost finishing someone, that is very, very much effective grappling. Like, effective grappling is not just taking someone down or pushing someone against the cage. You're not going to get scored hugely for that, because the effect of it isn't great. But the effect of choking someone or getting them in an armbar and having it full on, hurting their arm, like Vitor Belfort against John Jones in that fight, where he looked like he broke his arm or he hurt some tendons or something, that is going to score heavily because it's effective grappling. It's hurting the opposition fighter. Your grappling is hurting them. It's having an effect on the fight, almost finishing the fight. That scores. So let's move on to the next part of it here. Effective aggressiveness, and this is obviously the plan B after the grappling and striking. Aggressively making attempts to finish the fight. The key term is effective. Chasing after an opponent with no effective result or impact should not render in the judges' assessments. Effective aggressiveness is only to be assessed if effective striking and grappling is 100% equal for both competitors. So let's just read that again. Aggressively making attempts to finish the fight. So, you're going after someone, you're trying to land big strikes, you're aggressive on the ground, going for submissions or something like that. That is this. If the striking, grappling are even, you go to that. If you're looking for submissions and you get submissions, or you're almost submitting someone, that's effective striking or grappling. Sorry. If you're looking for strikes and you're landing strikes, that's effective striking. If you're looking for them, you don't get them, and everything else is even before that, that's effective aggressiveness, and you win the round based on that. So let's get to the next part of it then. Fighting area control. And I'll leave the link for this obviously in the description below. ABC Boxing, you'll see up here as well. Fighting area control. Fighting area control is assessed by determining who is dictating the pace, place and position of the match. Fighting area control should only be assessed if effective striking, grappling and effective aggressiveness is 100% equal for both competitors. This will be assessed very rarely. So this is the octagon control. Everyone talks about octagon control, and you see here very rarely, very, very rarely, only if effective striking, grappling, or even only if effective aggressiveness is even as well. So you almost never see this. Almost never. So if you're saying someone won the fight via octagon control, you're probably incorrect. You're probably incorrect, because fights are, you're split. The judges are there to see the impactfulness of strikes. They see someone getting hit with a big shot, and is that shot worth more than the next shot? That's why judges are there. That's why they're sitting cage side, to see the impactfulness of strikes and to judge that way. You know, Ben Cartley showed me on that podcast we did, judging is a verb as well as a noun. They're not just the judge, they go in there and they judge. So that's why judges are there. That's why you need experienced judges as well. And this is why this criteria falls down when you don't have experienced judges. So you need someone who's been doing it a long time and who does it well. So let's get back into reading this again. And now the round scoring. A 10-10 round in MMA is when both fighters have competed for whatever duration of time in the round and there is no difference or advantage between either fighter. A 10-10 round in MMA should be extremely rare and is not a score to be used as an excuse by a judge that cannot assess the differences in the round. A 10-10 round in MMA is a necessity to have the judge's possible score, mainly due to scoring incomplete rounds. It is possible to have a round where both fighters engage for 5 minutes and at the end of the 5-minute time period, the output, impact, effectiveness and overall competition between the two fighters is exactly the same. It is possible, but highly unlikely. If there is any discernible difference between the two fighters during the round, the judge shall not give the score of 10-10. Again, this will be extremely rare. So to get a 10-10 round, we need these three things to be even. First of all, grappling and striking. It's rare that you go to effective aggressiveness, and then it's rare that you go to octagon control. So the first one has to be even, effective striking and grappling. The second one has to be even, effective aggressiveness, and the third one has to be even, octagon control. 10-10 rounds don't exist. If the round goes the full round, 10-10 rounds exist if the fight goes a minute and the fight has to be stopped and it has to go to the judges in, I think it's the fourth round or the third round in 3-round fights, something like that. That's where a 10-10 round exists. But if a full round goes 10-10, or a full round goes, if it goes 5 minutes in a round, no judge in the world should be scoring that 10-10. If you are at home scoring a 10-10, you're making up your own rules. Basically, this is what this says. This is the written criteria I'm looking at here in front of me. You should be looking at it in front of you as well. This is the written criteria of MMA. 10-10 rounds basically do not exist. Right, a 10-9 round. A 10-9 round in MMA is where one combatant wins the round by a close margin. A 10-9 round in MMA is the most common score a judge assesses during the fight. If, during the round, the judge sees a fighter land the better strikes or utilize effective grappling during the competition, even if by just one technique over their opponent, that's important, even by one technique, the judge shall give the winning fighter a score of 10 while assessing the losing fighter a score of 9 or less. So that's how close it can be. One technique before you go to effective aggressiveness or effective octagon control, the tertiary scoring method. That's all it takes. That's all the difference it needs to be to get a 10-9. So, you know, when people talk about that, there should be a huge difference to get a 10-8 and a small difference to get a 10-9. There can be a very small difference to get a 10-9. And I'll read on. It is imperative that judges understand that a score of 9 is not an automatic numerical score given to the losing fighter of the round. The judge must consider, was the fighter engaged in offensive actions during the round? Did the losing fighter compete with an attitude of attempting to win the fight, or just to survive offensive actions during the round? Offensive actions of their opponent, A score of 10-9 can reflect an extremely close round or a round of marginal domination and or impact, and we'll get to the 3Ds in a second here, I'm sure. A 10-8 round in MMA is where one fighter wins the round by a large margin. A 10-8 round in MMA is not the most common score a judge will render, but is absolutely essential to the evolution of the sport and the fairness to the fighters that judges understand and effectively utilize a score of 10-8. A score of 10-8 does not require a fighter to dominate their opponent for 5 minutes of the round. The score of 10-8 is utilized by judges when the judge sees verifiable actions on the part of either fighter. Judges shall always give a score of 10-8 when the judge has established that one fighter has dominated the action of the round, had duration of the domination, and also impacted their opponent with effective strikes or grappling maneuvers that have diminished the abilities of their opponent. So this is the 3Ds here. Domination, duration, damage. When all three of these are there, that's a 10-8. So the next part, judges must and here's the two of the D's here is next. Judges must consider giving the score of 10-8 when a fighter shows dominance. That's one of the D's in the round, even though no impactful scoring against the opponent was achieved. MMA is an offensive based sport. Can I highlight that? MMA is an offensive based sport. No scoring is given for defensive maneuvers. Let me highlight that again. No scoring is given for defensive maneuvers. Go over and read John Jones's tweet that he put out today. No scoring is given for defensive maneuver. This is written in the rules. These rules are not made up. It's written in the rules right here. Using smart, tactical, sound defensive maneuvers allows the fighter to stay in the fight and to be competitive. Dominance of a round can be seen in the striking, where the losing fighter continually attempts to defend and no counters or reaction taken when openings present themselves. Dominance in the grappling phase can be seen by fighters taking dominant positions in the fight and utilizing those positions to attempt fight-ending submissions or attacks. If a fighter has little to no offensive output during the 5 minute round, it should be normal for the judge to consider awarding the losing fighter 8 points instead of 9. So if there's no attack coming and all the attacks coming from the other person, you think about giving 8 instead of 9. Judges must consider giving the 10-8 when a fighter, and consider is in big writing there, when a fighter impacts their opponent significantly in a round, even though they do not dominate the action. Effectiveness in striking or grappling, which leads to a diminishing of a fighter's energy, confidence, abilities, and spirit. All of these come as a direct result of negative impact. When a fighter is hurt with strikes showing a lack of control or ability, these can be defining moments in the fight. If a judge sees that a fighter has been significantly damaged in a round, the judge should consider the score of 10-8. So, I think that's pretty well said there. All the different aspects. There's, the 3Ds, the 2Ds, and the 1D, whichever one it is. They should consider it. They should give it, and they should definitely give it if it's the 3Ds. So let's talk about impact. A judge shall assess if a fighter impacts their opponent significantly in the round, even though they may not have dominated the action. Impact includes visible evidence such as swelling and lacerations, i.e. cuts. Impact should also be assessed when a fighter's actions using the striking and or grappling lead to a diminishing of the opponent's energy, confidence, abilities, and spirit. All of these come as a direct result of impact. When a fighter is impacted with strikes by the lack of control and or ability, this can create defining moments in the round and shall be assessed with great value. As we talked about earlier, as you saw above, it said as well about the immediate impact. This is what impact means. Someone gets swollen, someone gets hurt, someone gets cut. This is the impact that we talk about. Like someone landed a big flying knee hurting someone. That's a big impact, and that counts a lot. Here's dominance. As MMA is an offensive-based sport, dominance of a round can be seen in striking when the losing fighter is forced to continually defend with no counters or reaction taken when openings present themselves. So that's a pretty good explanation there, I think, of dominance in striking. Dominance in the grappling phase can be seen by fighters taking dominant positions in the fight and utilizing those positions to attempt fight-ending submissions or attacks. Merely holding a dominant positions should not be a primary factor in assessing dominance. What the fighter does with those positions is what must be assessed. Read that again. What the fighter does with those positions is what must be assessed. So you can't just be laying in a position on the ground. You can't just be standing there with a dominant position. Unless it goes to the secondary and tertiary scoring systems. If you want effective striking, grappling, and that's the most important thing. That's the first thing you look at. You don't even bother looking at the other things. If there's one difference in strikes or one difference in grappling dominance. What a fighter does with those positions is what must be assessed. Remember that when you're watching fights. Remember all of this. It's so important. Duration. Duration is defined by the time spent by one fighter effectively attacking, controlling, and impacting their opponent, while the opponent offers little to no offensive output. A judge shall assess duration by recognizing the relative time in a round when one fighter takes and maintains full control of the effective offense. This can be assessed both standing and grounded. So judges, they write down the time a takedown happens. A lot of the time, you'll see judges. I'm sure some judge, if they watch this, they might tweet out their notes and show that they've written down takedown at 2:15, got back up at 4:38, and they know there's a duration there. There's a long time on the ground, and in that meantime, they're judging the effectiveness of the grappling or the striking on the ground, right? So a 10-7 round. A 10-7 round in MMA is when a fighter completely overwhelms their opponent in effective striking and their grappling, and a stoppage is warranted. A 10-7 round in MMA is a score where judges rarely give. Now, I think it's the second round of Chris Weidman, Luke Rockhold. To me, that would have been close to a 10-7. That's the sort of round you need. Someone getting beaten so badly that we all think the referee is terrible because he doesn't stop it. That's basically a 10-7 round. Someone getting destroyed. It takes both overwhelming dominance of a round, but also impact that at times cause the judge to consider that the fight could be stopped. Exactly that round that I talked about. Is it the second or third round? You know anyway. The round where Chris Weidman gets absolutely destroyed by Luke Rockhold. That's the best example I think I can give. There's another one I think goes with CB Dalloway. That's close to a 10-7 round. I'm sure someone will remind me of that, but that's what we're talking about here. Judges shall look for the multiple impactful blows or knockdowns that diminish the fighter and our grappling maneuvers that place the fighter in dominant situations, with impact being inflicted that visibly diminishes the fighter's abilities to compete. So that's a 10-7 round, and that's the end of it. It's not that long, 4 pages. So let's go just give a quick run through again. Prioritize career, effective grappling and striking. That's the first thing. If you land one more strike than person, if you have one piece of effective grappling more than them, at the end of the 5 minutes, you win that round. And that starts again after the next 5 minutes. And that starts again after the next 5 minutes. And if it goes to championship rounds, it starts again after the next 5 minutes and the next 5 minutes. Fights are judged in 5-minute fights. It's the score is literally handed up by the judge after the round, and then they start again, and it's handed up again after that round. So at the end of the fight, they can't say, oh, I don't think Dominic Gray should have lost this by 4-1. I think it's closer to 3-2. At the end of the round, the referee's only handing up their score for the 5th round, so they can't go back and change their mind. The next part of it here is, I talked about effective grappling, striking. Plan B, effective aggressiveness, pushing forward, trying to land strikes or trying to get submissions, and area control is controlling where the fight is fought. Octagon control, as we talk about, you only use that when the other two there's no difference. So 10-10 rounds basically don't exist. As we see here, 10-10 rounds, extremely rare. 10-9 rounds where there's a close margin can be just one technique or a little bit more, and 10-8 rounds where the triple Ds, I talked about them. If you have all 3 Ds, definite 10-8 round. If there's an overwhelming 10 triple Ds, we have the 10-7 round, which we get to down here. Then the impact, as we know, something that visibly hurts someone, knocks them down, cuts them, has swelling. We see the big welts on people's legs all the time. Dominance, where you dominate the position on someone, where you land lots of strikes, you just dominate someone over the 5-minute round. And duration, as I said, if you get a takedown, land on top for a long period, or winning the striking for a long period, that's the duration. Those are the 3 Ds which judges look at when considering a 10-9, when considering a 10-8. And then, as I mentioned, the 10-7 round as well. Absolutely overwhelming dominance. So that's it. This went a little bit longer than I thought it would be, but I think it's worth watching. Please, 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 if you enjoyed this, and if you hadn't read the scoring system before, you hadn't read the criteria before, or you came into this video and maybe you thought it was a boxing criteria that we use, and we use the 10-9 must system, or the 10-point must system, sorry, because it's a boxing model, and we use the exact same boxing system. We don't. I just read it out to you. The system we have, the criteria we have. You might not like it. You might have ways to change it that you think of. But please do it from this position. From the position of knowing. From the position of having read the rules and knowing the rules. And like so many people haven't done. High-level journalists, high-level fighters, high-level analysts, high-level commentators. They haven't done this simple... What are we? 23 minutes in. They haven't done it. So please tell people about this. Please listen to my podcast. I'll leave it in the description below with Ben Cartledge. We talk for an hour about judging. He's a judge. He's judged Bellator, UFC title fights. I think he's coming up on 2,000 fights this year having judged. He's experienced there. These guys know what they're talking about. And I think we need, before we start to criticize judging, we need to understand judging. And lots of people don't, and that's the point. And I hope this will help, because I really want people to know what they're talking about, and just to read these actual rules and realize there are rules there. Right, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Please tell a friend, and I'll see you next time.